Welcome to Absolutely PlayStation Steam Gamers Tower Talk, Episode 4. I'm Shank, this is Coda, and we are going to get right into it. Last week we left off with a discussion about PvE versus PvP balancing. A couple weeks ago we talked about doing a Sandbox discussion. Well, we're going to throw all of that at you this week because the TWAB is literally just pictures and artwork.
Pretty pictures.
They're good.
I want the
good.
T-shirt with the baby Elixir.
Yeah, we'll link here some of the nice looking artwork that made it. Okay, so we're kind of just gonna be freeforming here. Starting off, I want to talk about the stasis nerfs that went into effect a couple weeks ago. From there, we're going to kind of segue into a discussion about buffs versus nerfs, weapons we'd like to see, subclasses we'd like to see buffed. We'll hit that big topic of PvE versus PvP balancing. Talk about cheaters. Can't talk about the Sandbox without not talking about cheaters. We'll talk about sunsetting, which is a big hot topic issue, and loot density, and then we'll finish up with one thing we would change if we could. But to start off, let's go ahead and start with our thoughts on the stasis nerfs.
They were fine.
Go.
I like them.
I disagree entirely.
I like every change that happened. I feel like absolutely no change affected how they acted at the time in PvE, but they all had a drastic change in how they worked in PvP.
I do see that PvP had a big change, and it was needed because Behemoth was...
Not just Behemoth. In my opinion, Hunters are the worst with stasis.
Yes, and I feel like Hunters in PvE was not nerfed. I feel like it did the right amount to reduce the amount of stasis Hunters you see.
Mm-hmm.
But Behemoth was absolutely neutered.
They
took away your armor. They added a cooldown to the slide. The entire point of the class is mobility. And made it so that it costs more super energy to use the one part. They nerfed the neutral game, and then they also nerfed the super to the point where it's basically become unusable, at least in high-end PvE content. But you seem to disagree, so I'll let you go.
In my opinion, if you're playing Titan PvE-wise, Stasis is the worst class to pick to begin with. Even if you want crowd control, I think Bottom Tree Solar does a better job being able to put sunspots right where enemies are spawning and you know they're spawning and buff your allies and yourself. I think that the real reason why you used it was for the mobility for PvE. If that's the case, yeah, it got hit. I don't think they needed to affect the punch at all, but they drastically nerfed your ability to mobilize with the punch. The slide, honestly, the worst PvE aspect anyways. That was a PvP aspect. The slide now is replaced by the javelin for most high-end PvE, which makes sense. The javelin is amazing in PvE. All you have to do is get freeze kill.
I do like the addition of the javelin. The javelin was nice. My biggest issue is that the identity of the Behemoth was that you freeze then shatter. And not even necessarily freeze. That could be done by the other classes easily enough. But it was creating ice crystals and then shattering them quickly. And the primary way
was slide.
Most Titans did that was with sliding. Which drastically neuters the way you're able to use them when you're playing high-end PvE.
I can see that its PvE capabilities were hurt. I just don't think it had much PvE capabilities to begin with compared to the other classes that Titans have access to. Like, you're not using it for damage, because Thunder Crash. If you want to kill a bunch of ads, Hammers lets you do that while safely keeping a distance and getting a buff. if you want to stay safe and keep your allies safe. That's what Void's for. Stasis kind of had a role of its own and not one that anyone would pick.
Okay, but I'll push back on that a little bit because we're going to talk about this later in the podcast. But you're telling me that what they decided to do was nerf the weakest PvE class because it didn't have a role.
So
they chose to nerf it because it was so good in PvP.
I dislike nerfs. I wish that the bottom tier would get buffed. I'm not a Bungie dev. If they're going to nerf something, I think they did an okay job nerfing it. I just wish they buffed the other classes instead.
I guess what I saw happen to Behemoth, and it's kind of like what I saw with Nova Warp, is they took a usable PvE choice and nerfed it to the point where it's unusable now.
Yeah. I just never saw it as a PvE choice even when Stasis first came out. I thought it was the worst subclass out of the three as far as PvE went, so I just never picked it. But when I was complaining about Stasis and the changes I wanted it to have, I just wanted it to not slow or permafreeze in PvP. Those were the only changes it really needed. But they took so long to get there on the changes that every aspect of Stasis started getting complained about, so they had to nerf it every aspect instead of the one that's actually the problem.
See, I think there's an easy fix for what happened, and that is the heavy attack should basically be a ground pound that in a 360 degree area slows on the first ground pound and freezes on the second ground pound. Instead of shooting out ice crystals the way it did. In
right.
like a, what was that, like a 90 or like a
it's like a 45 degree cone. Yeah.
Right. I think instead it should have been a slow, and then if you use more of your super energy, you freeze things that are in that same cone. Because then you can still use the slide to shatter if you decide to freeze people in PvP.
Right.
But you're using up half of your energy at that point just to freeze them.
I guess we're talking more about changes that we would like to see done to Stasis, because the Stasis nerfs happen. I don't think they were all that major in PvE, but Behemoth did take a serious hit if you enjoy that subclass. That's basically the long and short of that. A change I would have liked for Behemoth is maybe you do remove its mobility aspect, but you just change how it works. Keep its armor, and now its attack is a ground slam that you can keep like mashing down on, kind of like when Hulk's pissed, and it does like an increasing radius of damage. Like it starts with ice right next to you, and it bashes them out. Maybe that would have been a cool change. And
that's another great idea for how to make it still useful in PvE, but reduce its effectiveness in PvP.
Right, because in PvP, if a behemoth starts slamming on the ground, you just jump.
And if you get caught in it, you're going to die.
Right.
And it's not like...
if you get hit by any super, you should die.
Right. That wouldn't have been an issue. And then the mobility aspect is less of an issue. Mm-hmm. I do argue that they need to re-release Armamentarium so that Titans have at least one mobility exotic or like skill.
Dune Marchers and Lion Rampant.
They do. They provide you like improved mobility.
Artaeus wards.
My argument has always been for Titans is that if you get caught out of position in PvP, Hunters have dodge, Warlocks have Icarus Dash. You can immediately change direction and get back behind cover instantaneously. And that's what Armamentarium was in Destiny 1.
I think just bring Titan skating back in general.
Twilight Garrison. Armamentarium was the
Yeah.
grenade thing.
I understood what you were talking about.
Twilight Garrison. Yeah,
Yeah.
but for the people who are watching, it was Twilight Garrison.
Just bring back Titan skating. I know you non-Titans, you don't like the fact that we're fast boys, but hey, we can go fast. It's fine. Sometimes we hit a wall going too fast,
and then we die. Enough about Titans. Did you see anything with Hunters that you were upset with? The main thing that they did was they reduced the tracking of...
No, every change to Hunters was exactly what I was like, yeah, they need this change, they need that change. And even then, it's not like it reduced their usability, because they're still one of the most used subclasses of Hunters in PvP that I've run into.
Right. They reduced the tracking of their Silence and Squall.
Oh, yeah.
No, the Silence and Squall. They reduced the tracking of the Shuriken, and I believe they put a longer cooldown on Shatter Dive.
Yep.
Which, the longer cooldown on Shatter Dive I have noticed in PvE, but not to the point where it breaks the subclass.
Right, and that's one that's like, isn't a change that really affects them in PvP, because it's not like you Shatter Dive and then Shatter Dive. Usually, you throw a grenade that frees someone, and then you Shatter Dive the one time. I don't see people going around the map Shatter Diving.
Yeah. Okay, so we both agree Hunters got away pretty... I don't want to say scot-free. They did take a nerf, but it put them in line with PvP where all the other... It's usable in PvP, just like every other subclass is usable.
I do think it's still their best PvP subclass, but that's not necessarily a problem, because Hunters always have pretty good PvP subclasses. So, and Warlock's just been bad to begin with after the first round of nerfs. They didn't get hit that bad here. The main thing is their melee.
Are you paying attention to the current meta in PvE?
In
Warlocks
PvE?
could have got... Yeah, in PvP, they... Ever since that first nerf, they've kind
right,
of
you're doing the
PvE
talk. I'm doing the PvP talk.
Okay, go ahead with your PvP nonsense. Go for it.
The main problem for them was their melee, because it had way too much range, was way too snappy, and it insta-froze you. Most of that's been addressed. I think now they need to look at Celestial Fire, being able to do half your health in a punch from across the map, from behind a wall. That's a little bit much, but...
I'd argue they need to increase the range in PvP for Stasis. And for Celestial Fire, hell, they either need to reduce the tracking on it or reduce the damage it does. One or the other.
I want them to bring the range down to about where the Stasis one is, and the damage should not be 160.
I disagree. I think if it doesn't have good tracking, then it should. Because it basically...
They can keep the tracking, but keep it close range. Like, closer range. It already outranges the distance a Titan can lunge.
Right, but the point is I don't think it should just disappear. I just think the tracking should be disabled after a certain range. That way, if you do land a hit, it should still take a decent
you can make it
chunk
into a skill shot, yeah.
Yeah.
But
because then it's a skill issue, and you're not going to worry about that in PvE. It's not going to affect PvE, because you're probably not going to be yeeting some fireballs that far across the map anyways.
I dislike that Warlocks get 2 tracking laser beam punches. Hunters have their one-shot knife to your head. And us Titans, we get a stupid hammer that does like 45 damage on hit, and I have to go and pick that shit up again.
Yeah, they don't get to pick their shit up. Although, I guess Hunters don't even have to pick their shit up.
In PvP, you ain't picking that up.
Right. I think that's more of a class identity type of thing.
We're the punchy group. Why do they got better punchies?
Right, but we punch them. We don't throw things at them or pocket sand magic at them. We're supposed to punch them. We have 3 one-shot melees if you can get close enough.
Their twinkle fingle punchies are hurting me before I can get in for an
We
actual
have
punch.
3 one-hit punches if you get close enough.
Make all of them a one-hit punch.
Okay.
Anyways, how is it going in PvE for the Warlocks?
It's the meta subclass, so it doesn't really matter what they nerfed for stasis because Bleak Watcher turrets are the meta right now. They freeze everything. You get your grenade back. I have another world. You throw it again. It freezes everything for you. It's taking care of Grandmasters. It's taking care of Master Vault. It's
not
absurd. It's going to get nerfed. It's so absurd in PvE right now. So
it's not the
if
best
they did-
DPS though. It's not the best DPS on like bosses, but
No,
like
it's
for
the
a
best
general,
crowd control.
yeah, crowds.
It's the best crowd control super in the game, which in-game content, we have DPS options. We haven't needed DPS options. What we've needed is a crowd control that can take care of high-end PvP combatants. And Warlocks do that with stasis in spades, to the point where I can't imagine it not getting nerfed.
Well, I mean, crowd control is the identity of stasis. That's what all the stasis subclasses are supposed to do.
It's what they aspire to.
Right.
Only one of them is fulfilling that fantasy right now.
I would say hunters are pretty good at crowd control. Titans
Their
are the
super
worst.
is.
Yeah.
Their super
well,
is.
even their daggers can chain to multiple targets.
I think
They can dodge back to freeze. I think it's Titans that are the weakest for crowd control because theirs are very target focused.
for hunters, if you spec into melee and regenerating your melee, then you can get very crowd control focused with hunter. Warlock has Bleak Watcher. Titans, I agree. They just don't have. There isn't a reason to run Behemoth.
Which is
point.
why they should just keep punching the ground. Generate an
I like
area
that.
of control.
I like that. I honestly think I like that idea better.
Bungie,
Actually,
that one's free.
Let's combo our ideas. It's a 360 circle that, as you punch, just gets wider and wider and wider, and then a different button will shatter every crystal you have.
Oh yeah, like he does like one really big punch on the ground.
And it just shatters everything and kills anything that's in a certain zone, because in PvP, you just get away from that zone, you're safe.
Mm-hmm.
And PvE,
it doesn't have to even be like
useful.
a huge circle. It can be like, maybe like 6-7 feet around them.
Nah, make it a huge circle. Quit stripping my power fantasy. Okay.
That's free, Bungie.
So
that one's free.
Enough focused stasis talk.
Yep.
Let's talk about our philosophy and Bungie's philosophy with buffs versus nerfs in a general sense. Where do you stand on this argument?
Well, first let's say what Bungie does, and then we'll say what we want them to do. What Bungie does is they look at something that's performing well. They take the biggest, fattest hammer they have. I'm talking like Middle Tree Titan hammer. And they just bash it down. And then if something's underperforming, they'll take like, a little piece of duct tape and they'll like try and fix that on it. And maybe that'll like help it a little bit, but usually it doesn't do anything.
Or they will just leave it in obscurity for 4 years and just don't touch it.
And then you got things like Trinity Ghoul, where instead of, a little bit of duct tape, they just took a mound from something they nerfed and they put it on top of Trinity Ghoul. And now it's amazing.
Right. And I feel like this has all been a reaction to... So, a little bit of history of Destiny. I feel like if you're watching this podcast, you either play or at least are a fan of Destiny long enough to know. D1 came out. We were slow. Our region times were really slow. Mm-hmm. It was all in a focus to try to make PvP competitive.
Right.
Which isn't the argument we're having right now. And they spent all of year one making us faster, making our recharge rates go faster, giving us exotics that will basically break a certain portion of the game, make you get grenades back super quick, make you get your melee back super quick, allow you to not synchronize, what's the word I'm looking for? Synergize
Mm.
your builds so that you can become more and more powerful, fulfilling
Right.
that power fantasy. Then they got to Season of the Drifter, and they realized that we were so powerful at that point that they had to start breaking the rules of how they designed encounters,
Right. And
spawning enemies behind you,
encounters had to
making
literally
enemies
be
able
able
to
to,
one shot.
yeah, enemies had to be able to push you off a map in order to kill you.
Exactly. So, starting at the end of year 2, going into year 3, they took more of a we need to make sure that we don't let power creep affect our encounter design.
Hmm.
And I think that might possibly be the worst decision that they've made so far as a PvE only player. I do get what they're saying as far as they had to like push us off of ledges in order to win. But I feel like that is a wrench fix, not a hammer fix.
Hmm.
And they didn't even use a hammer, they just threw a toolbox at everything and made it so that they're just going to nerf anything that stands out like in a fantastic way.
So that definitely is it. I also see it as being a problem from before Season of the Drifter. When you look at Spyro Stars, people complained a lot when Spyro Stars uh, came out because the final raid boss for that, Valul or something like that, he has a lot of mechanics to him. And Dum Dums weren't able to figure out mechanic too good. So stop putting mechanic in fight, let me just stand on plate and shoot boss, please, is basically how every boss fight now became after that. You don't have to open them up to a damage phase while also doing other mechanics, you know? And
Which is so sad because honestly, Spire Star's boss fight was one of my favorite.
right, it complex boss fights are how you deal with the fact that we were so strong by giving us complexities. Therefore, we could, we could die if we weren't performing well, even though we're very difficult to kill from the boss damage.
Another good
That's
example was the Crown of Sorrow.
yeah,
That boss fight was a chaotic mess up until you were able to DPS. And then most of the time, yeah, we were able to one phase them because we're overpowered god killers. That's what we're supposed to be able to do. But if you're not on top of all the mechanics, then the mechanics themselves would kill you, not necessarily Galron or any of the ads.
I
I
mean,
think that is the way they need to approach encounter design.
yeah,
You make it so the mechanics kill you, not necessarily the ads. If you want the ads to kill somebody, put them in Grandmaster, put them in Master Raids. Those ads will kill you just fine without pushing you off.
right. I mean, look at. I mean, she's a joke now because of cheese and other things, but Riven of a Thousand Voices is one of the hardest fights to legitly play through if it wasn't for our damage. It's so insane now. Uh, but there's constant mechanics while you're trying to deal with the boss. You have to shoot the eyes right. You have to then call out the eyes to the other team while you're also figuring out uh, standing behind with the little orb thing to be able to see the things you have to kill. That kind of stuff.
Right. And I never would have had an issue if they would have made Riven's feet immune
Right.
to force people to actually do the encounter.
Mm.
I wish they would have earlier, but they didn't. And then it was a year and a half later.
Right.
And what's the point? At that point, all you're doing is locking newer players out of loot that all the old players,
Cheese their
veteran
way.
players, cheese their way through to get.
Yeah.
So How is that fair? But I enjoy complex raid encounters, which we're getting a little bit off topic. The entire point of this discussion was
Buff versus nerf. But
buff
a,
versus nerf.
a lot of this comes into the encounters. And the encounters wound up having to be easier and easier for people to complete. So as a result, they've had to look at our armor and our weapons and be like, okay, that's overperforming, bring that down. That one's overperforming, bring that down. Instead of adjusting the difficulty of what we're fighting, they adjust our capabilities as guardians.
Right. The issue is that we can burst TBS too fast.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to reduce our ability to do burst DPS, but also reduce the difficulty of encounters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel like the worst of this was Garden of Salvation.
Yeah.
You run around basically playing Gambit for, what would you say, 6-7 minutes? Collecting motes, depositing, going
it's
in,
like 7
collecting
minutes,
motes,
yeah.
depositing. Then you get a 30-second damage phase. And then you have to go through another 6 minutes of collecting motes for another 30-second damage phase. It's not fun to be limited to such a short damage phase just because we have too much power.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think Atheon is a good counter to that. Yes, it's a short damage phase, but they crank up how fast you get all your power.
Right.
And they also cranked up how much health Atheon has as a result of that. So it's fun to do that DPS instead of everybody sitting in a corner, either A, hoping they don't miss their Izanagi shots or Whisper shots, or B, just xenophaging very slowly until it's dead.
Mm-hmm. I had a thought, and then it's gone now. So continue.
But I guess the thing is, in the most recent issue we're having with this is going to be Anarchy.
Yeah, which I mean, they're
nerfing. They're nerfing it. And last week we talked about how, yes, Anarchy has been too good for too long, but I'm afraid they're going to hit it with a hammer when all they need is a wrench.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about putting 6 spikes to get the same damage currently that we're using for 2.
Right.
That way you can continue doing the DPS you're doing, but your ammo efficiency is going to be less. That's what's going to be affected, not the damage you can do. And I don't think that's what they're going to do. I think we're going to get an issue similar to Wardcliff or Sleeper. I don't think did Whisper take a bad nerf? Box breathing got a nerf.
Whisper got nerfed to where it was almost unusable at one point.
Right, and then they end up having to like buff some of these back up. I'm sure at some point Izanagi's is going to take a horrible nerf, because if Anarchy's gone, Izanagi's... I mean, I'm surprised that Izanagi's ever dropped out of the meta as much as it has.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like anything that goes boom too hard eventually gets it stripped away.
Right. I don't think Izanagi's will suffer all that much, because Izanagi's kind of deals with itself ammo economy wise, since you are putting more ammo in for the one shot. Yeah, it's doing a lot of damage, but eventually you run out of those shots in the boss fight, and you have to use other tools. What I was thinking of was a good example of what's happening with the buffs versus nerfs is with Templar. We can shred through Templar right now with quick swapping between 2 shotguns. Guess what's getting nerfed? Our ability to quick swap between shotguns instead of buffing Templar to not allow that. Maybe he shouldn't start the boss fight right next to a very safe ledge for everyone to stand on.
But the ledge is only safe because of well. Well is what's breaking that encounter.
Right, but
Try to do that cheese without a well.
right, but you don't
And
want it to take well away from people.
no, you don't.
So if Templar instead started a little bit outside of select shotgun range, the shotguns wouldn't need to be adjusted because they wouldn't be all that useful because you would not be able to group up wherever else he goes. We've tried doing that whenever he's teleported around. We tried resetting up at other spots, and we
He
get
should
murdered by the Minotaurs.
he should spawn back in the far back area where he is for the confluxes.
I think give him random spawns.
Or random spawns. Random spawns would be great.
Yep.
Um Actually random spawns would probably
But
be better.
that would buff the engagement, but they don't want to do that. They're going to instead just nerf our power.
Yeah. Because I guess that's easier. Which is odd because he does randomly teleport from that point on. So
Right.
again, not a game dev, but if every other encounter can randomly spawn.
Or here's another idea. Everyone in the party team has to move to his teleport spot to stop his teleport.
No, that would be hell. That would be hell. That would bust the encounter.
Just
I
latch
don't like
your
that.
anarchy shots on him while you're moving, and those got nerfed again. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you think Witherhoard's going to take the?
I think
the top?
Witherhoard's a strong contender, but I don't know. I think Izanagi's with like a strong crowd clearing and a rocket launcher will become the main uses. Especially if you have Hazen's Visions with overflow, that plus Izzy's, you're not even going to miss Anarchy.
Hopefully, we don't have to miss Anarchy at all. Okay, why don't we transition over to weapon types that you would like to see buffed or nerfed? Go.
So I'm not going to recommend anything get nerfed. But I want to see scouts in a stronger position in both PvE and PvP. Not D2 year one strong position where they were the only option and everybody team shot because that just made Trials of the Nine boring. But I think close to that because I did enjoy using Midas multi-tool in PvE. So I like scout rifles, so
I
buff
do
'em.
think Scouts is the easy answer because they've been so bad for so long.
Mhm.
And I agree 100% with you. They need that buff.
Oh, and aggressive frame shotguns. Could we buff those? Maybe give them a little bit more range. Put quick draw on some of them. Why do none of these have quick draw?
I think pulse rifles, especially rapid fire pulse rifles, need a buff.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like they have a job. Why would you use a rapid fire pulse if you could use a high impact pulse or you could use an auto rifle?
I think the only good one is Grid Skipper. Before that was only like
And
bygones.
even so, why would you use that over auto rifle?
Well, better range, better precision damage was why you would use them over an auto rifle. Auto rifle's more like a clear ads, whereas pulse rifle you could use for like on a champion if you wanted to, because they do have decent headshot multipliers,
So
and
if you're
they
gonna
are
use it on
definitely
a
better than a
champion-
scout.
If you're going to use them on a champion, why wouldn't you use a high impact pulse?
Yeah, rapid fires are definitely the one that needs to be tweaked, but at the same time, how are you going to tweak them without making like a high impact better than the, or a rapid fire better than
Increase
the high impact?
damage, reduce ammo efficiency, or reduce reload speed, reduce. Don't take away the damage, make it more cumbersome to use so that you have to kind of balance how you're using the different types.
Yeah.
Because right now it feels like I'm just using a pulse rifle that does less damage.
On this, I've noticed that we are getting different things within the archetypes. For instance, the new shotgun that we were talking about last week is a precision frame, but not a slug shotgun. It
There are
fires
a couple of those.
Yeah, they're That one and the one from this season, Sojourners.
Sojourners.
Yeah, those are the only two other than Duality, which can swap between the two frames. It doesn't fire precision. So they took.
Um,
That's the
I
only
think
ones
that's
I think
because
of.
they sunset quite a few of them.
The
Um,
all the other ones that I at least looked at because I was confused by it. All the other ones that I looked at in my collections were slugs for the precision frame.
you might be sharding the ones that aren't slugs
Well,
because
I looked in
nobody uses them.
collections.
Oh, you looked in collections.
So
I thought they had quite a few of the buckshot aggressive frames.
aggressive, but not precision.
Oh, precision.
Yeah,
I feel like precision specifically
get
would
slugs.
be a slug.
Yeah,
The
but not this
precision
one.
sounds like slug.
Right, but not this one or Sojourners. Both of those are have actually like pellets. They're very tightly close pellets. Um, so it's an interesting change. I'm interested to see how the differences within the subtypes can go. Maybe they're testing that with shotguns.
Another thing I'd like to see, not necessarily buffed as far as damage goes, but we talked about this last week. Machine guns, I feel like, do not have a solid role
Hmm.
in PvE. And I feel like if they could make machine guns do more damage to minors and majors and improve their ammo efficiency,
Yeah.
it would make it so that if you're running as your heavy, you are able to control the crowd. Just
Hmm.
I, we won't talk about Vogmaster at this moment in time,
Right.
but there is an encounter where I had to use a machine gun, and it still felt like I would have been just as good off using an auto rifle or a grenade launcher. But it was just a matter of there are too many ads right now. I mean,
Hmm.
okay, it's not really spoiling to say it was Templar, so I had two slug shotguns. That's why I was using the machine gun.
Right.
But I guess my issue is that they don't stand out right
No.
now, and I feel like they need to stand out in doing something. And we already have burst DPS, sustained DPS. I feel like crowd control and dealing with minors in just an overwhelming fashion would be a good way to make it stand out as a heavy weapon, as being worthwhile of taking that heavy ammo brick.
So what I would like to see happen for machine guns is increase their damage overall, not to like the point where like they're out DPSing, a linear fusion or anything like that, but to where they're doing decent enough damage that like like you said they'll be able to tear through a major or something pretty easily. And maybe have machine guns because they are so ammo reliant. Maybe all machine guns have an innate ammo finder. Maybe you just get more ammo brick drops when you're using a machine gun. So that way you aren't
Or instead of doing that, you just give them more ammo.
right. But I think either way kind of works out because then also like say you're at the boss, you just killed a group of ads, and you have some heavy bricks lying around. Now you can safely swap off of your ad clearing weapon to like a rocket launcher or something and pick up those ammo bricks, and now you're not at zero ammo, which doesn't really matter because rally banners, but I guess it would matter for strikes. So I don't know.
Okay. So, any other archetypes you'd like to see adjusted? Obviously, I'd like to see fusion rifles adjusted,
Right, but
but
they're already doing that.
they're already doing that, so it's a null point talking about it.
I want to say bows, but I feel like bows are fine. Like
Exotic bows are fine.
yeah, but even like regular bows, if they're ever like the anti overload or something, I
If
don't
they're
feel I don't
anti-overload
feel
and you're not
like
using Tikus, you're doing a disservice to yourself.
bef-
I'm just
I
saying.
I know, but even before Tiku's came out, like I would use like a legendary bow, and it does fine. It's a bow. Pair it with something that kills things faster than fatigue, and you're fine.
Yeah, they are good when they have overload with them.
Yeah.
When they don't, I don't see a reason to use anything that's not exotic. but I don't know. It just doesn't have a niche that I feel like it fills without an extra little bit of oomph.
It kind of fills the same role as a scout, but it actually does one hit kill. Red bars. So
Yeah. It's also much slower.
mhm.
So give and take. I think that's a good place to wrap that particular discussion up.
Yep.
And now we'll come to. We've been hinting at this throughout the entire podcast and last week. PvE versus PvP balancing.
So, but when we were setting up the list of things, I'll remind you I said that we should do this one first because it'll take the longest. And look, here it is in the middle.
Yeah, but there wasn't a good way to segue.
Yeah,
into
it's
this,
it's fine. You guys enjoy it, right? All right. Yeah, PvE versus PvP balancing is atrocious.
It is. And I think if there's one thing we agree on this, it's that they need to separate the damn sandbox. Like,
So,
what blows my mind is that ever since D1, there has been a little subtext that comes up in perks that says, do extra damage to minions of the darkness.
mm,
Which implies that the game is able to differentiate between PvE enemies and PvP enemies.
right. I
Which
mean,
implies that they can tune them separately.
they already do tune them separately. Weapons do different damage inside PvE than PvP. And at the same time, they've already made adjustments for versus Guardians damage to some weapons anyways. It's just they don't typically do this for their nerfs and adjustments. I'm thinking the main issue that Destiny has always fought with whenever it comes to its PvP is they want you to have the ability to use the same loadout in both aspects of their game. The same weapons, the same tools of the trade, have no differences between the two. That's a shitty way to run this kind of a game.
Agreed.
It's too difficult because some things that you want to work a certain way for fighting against a drag will work completely different whenever somebody's running around with the same superpowers as you. It's just different levels of difficulty. And they wanted this to be a competitive game. And Bungie knows how to make competitive games. Halo 3 had some of the best competitive modes there are. Reach strongly built upon those whenever it came out. And they had separate sandboxes for casual and for hardcore. And those felt different in some ways than from whenever you're playing through the campaign. And it all still flowed well enough together. So why is it that they went from a system where they had 16 different game modes and different playlists for PvP and a well thought out campaign? Why is it that they moved to the Destiny model of it's all the same stats? It shouldn't be. There should be a casual PvP where you can use your loadout and people won't complain about it because it's casuals. There should be a competitive PvP where it's all the same playlists, like 1v1s, big team fights, all that. And it's competitive, and you start with the same weapons and the same ability regen timers, and everything is tailor-made for that competitive 1v1 experience.
So you take it further than I would. I was just going to say, at least at the very minimum, get rid of exotics in PvP.
Right.
There's no reason exotics should be in PvP.
What I'm wanting is an overarching change to how they look at their game model, as opposed to these little band-aids and little hammers on the wood. Because it is fundamentally flawed. It's a great shooter. I still play PvP in Destiny. I still enjoy it. That's why I'm saying the casual should not be changed, really. But there is no competitiveness to this game. And they keep saying there is. Even Trials is not competitive. It's full of cheaters. And it's full of sweats that get on other people's accounts that grinded up loot to be better than you. That's all Trials is.
But
Recubs are fine.
They're never going to go away.
I honestly think
Recubs
Recubs
is
fine.
something we're going to touch on in a little bit.
Right. But there's no competitive version. There's no reason also to be in competitive. You don't get to keep your rank. That resets at the season. There's no loot to chase in competitive. You get the same drops at the end of every match. There used to be pinnacles, pinnacle weapons, but those are gone now. They stripped out their own multiplayer, and then they still want to make it seem like it's a valued function of the game. It's not anymore. You removed the value.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. PvP's fundamentally broken. Balancing is out the window. Cheaters. Recubs. Why do I keep feeling the nerfs in PvE over a broken, semi-half-dead game mode?
That's why they need to readjust their entire game model.
Right.
While they're not, I'm going to agree with nerfs whenever they happen, if it's something super negative in PvP, simply because there's nothing to that game mode. It's already trash. They're removing little bits of trash at a time. That's great, I guess. I'll give them credit there.
See, I don't see it as a credit. All I see it as hurting your more active, engaged players.
Right. But they are getting better at not hurting.
To not satisfy the portion of the game that has fundamental issues that go beyond balance right now. I mean, It is balance, but it's not. Like you said, they need to have a completely separate playlist where recovery times are all the same, or not all the same, because they did recently come out and they did a podcast with Firing Line, and they were talking about how if it's a roaming super, it should probably take longer to charge.
Right. So
if it's a one-hit super,
let you pick your subclass
quickly.
Yeah, let you pick your subclass for this competitive mode, and it adjusts your stats and whatnot to be the competitive stat grouping for that. So also, whenever you need to make an adjustment, you're just making an adjustment to this default loadout, as opposed to the game.
Right. I think they should limit which weapons you can bring into PvP, because exotics just don't belong in there. There's no reason to have exotics in there.
Exotics are for the PvE, like, fantasy of being a guardian.
Right. All exotics do is introduce an imbalance somewhere where you're looking for balance.
I think Shank is confused because he's expecting this to be a debate, and we're just agreeing with each other.
In my defense, you have argued with me every time we brought this up, except for right now.
I have argued because you've mentioned things like a big thing where this has come up was the stasis nerfs that we started this off with, and you were very upset when those were first announced. I was like, they're all right. They don't really affect anything. And turns out they don't really affect anything.
We're disagreeing. I was upset before.
I know. Bungie has had
I was upset before all of the stasis nerfs went into effect.
Right. Bungie's had a history.
Half a year. Right. I've been saying for half a year to a year now. No offense to my PvP players, but screw PvP balance until they fix the game mode. I'm sorry, but your issues are not whether or not it's the stasis is balanced. Your issue is that you have cheaters with wall hacks, with auto aim, with infinite sniper ammo. Your ammo economy is busted.
Mm-hmm.
And you're telling me that your primary concern is that stasis titans are sliding too much. Which, granted, they are. And if there was a separate PvP sandbox, they could tune that over there to make it so that's less annoying over there. The difference is that they're ignoring the huge elephant in the room. They're like, well, we fixed this mouse over here, so we're doing a good job, right? Give us kudos. And I'm like, no, you killed my mouse over here that I was enjoying.
Right.
And you're ignoring the big problem.
Bungie has
problem.
Bungie has had a history of, I said it at the top of the podcast, taking a giant ass hammer to things as opposed to properly tweaking them. They have gotten better at this, but it's still not quite there. They're still making changes to both aspects of the game, so things feel the same for both. It doesn't need to.
No, I feel like at this point they have. I feel like they had a vision, which in 2014 was a nice vision to have, where the weapons that you learn in PvE go over to PvP. The weapons you take in PvP go over to PvE. It's a unified sandbox. It's a unified experience. And nobody was doing that. And it was an innovative vision to test.
Right.
We are 7 years into this. It's been tested. It doesn't work.
No.
It doesn't.
And Bungie does good whenever they actually focus on what a PvP should be. They're the pioneers of the fair start PvP experience. Go back to that.
Yeah, and I think Destiny could have great PvP if it had a fair start and if they were able to address the cheating problem.
Yeah, which I guess we're moving into the cheating problem.
It's all one thing.
It's one thing. Yep. They have anti-cheat. Get better anti-cheat.
The thing is they have their own anti-cheat, and I feel like they need to bring in something like Battle Eye.
Mm-hmm. Well,
or a similar company that they contract out to, that's sole job is to keep up with the cheaters in the game. And yes, I know the cheaters will always be a step ahead of you, but at this point, there's a third big issue that's in PvP right now, and that is that the population is low. You want to know why you don't have 8 game modes in competitive?
Because there's not enough people filled out, because people are tired of dealing with cheaters.
Right. I mean, it's really as simple as until that cheating problem is dealt with, you're not going to get your population up. Until the population's up, you can't get new game modes. Or they have to keep circling the game modes the way they are.
Right. It's interesting because, I mean, even with games like Fortnite that has 2 different cheat detecting softwares built into it, they still get cheaters. So I understand there's always going to be cheaters, and at this point, I mean, Bungie has already sued one of the developers of the cheat engine, and people are still getting cheats. So it's a difficult thing, I think, that they're having to face, because now these cheaters are a little bit too grown in. It's like when weeds get a little bit too much roots and they're hard to pull up, because it's a free game. You can play the PvP for free. So you ban an account, they make a new account. The YouTube dude that got banned recently had 4 accounts that he was cheating on. So what do you do about that? Because he's just going to make a 5th account now. There was a guy that Lucky 10 made a video on. He was live streaming cheating. And he's been live streaming cheating. I think he's still not banned. Actually, after Lucky made his video, he probably got banned. But he was live streaming cheats openly for a while of him flying around the map, phasing through walls, infinite sniper ammo, the worst kind of cheats. And that kind of thing can exist in your game. You don't have anything that's monitoring a match that sees that person fired 600 sniper bullets in 2 seconds. It's a little sus,
That person's headshot rating is 97%.
This player activated NoClip. He shouldn't have access to NoClip. maybe catch that.
Right. There are things where it doesn't matter what the cheat is. If you get to a certain point of efficiency or a certain speed or... I feel like there are ways that you can design, at least where it alerts you to
right.
It flags it for
the people that barely they use wall hacks and like maybe barely an aimbot. I understand that's really difficult because from the people they're going against perspective, maybe they're a really skilled player. From what you're seeing from your stuff, they're just getting pretty good numbers of headshots. It's pretty hard to nail down that person's a cheater. I understand that. There are some people that are using such evasive cheats, it's like, your system is gotta see it.
Right.
And if it is,
Right.
and you just aren't responding fast enough, you need to respond faster.
Agreed. So bringing this back to what we were originally talking about, I'm really tired of a vocal PvP community that has bigger fish to fry than Stasis or Fellwinters or high impact pulse rifles or auto rifles or 120 hand cannons. With the issue with 120 hand cannons is that if you have an aimbot, then you hit your 2 shots, your 3 shots in a matter of seconds from across the map,
Well,
and it's done.
the problem with 120 hand cannons was more the fact that they pushed other weapons out of their respective capabilities. They outdid, pulses at their ranges, and they were competing with scouts and snipers. The main reason why you feel like the PvP community is over vocal about minor stuff is because that's all that Bungie ever addresses. People have been complaining since Destiny 2 came out about the lack of maps, the cheater problem, the imbalance of archetypal weapons, the fact that one subclass can outperform another. All of these overarching things are related to the entire sandbox. And they're adjusting them like one little item at a time instead of looking at the whole picture. That's a Bungie adjustment problem. And what you see is in the TWAB, they'll be like, we heard that you people don't like aggressive range shotguns, so we're going to address aggressive range shotguns. Well, okay, that was indeed one of the complaints, but the reason why people don't like the aggressive range shotguns is because subclasses allow you to move so fast that you can get in before your opponent can react and stuff like that. It's like, also the subclasses are the problem, which is also the map is the problem because all the maps are so small, you can't fight at long ranges, so scout rifles can't play a role, and everyone's running around with the shotgun, so maybe you need better maps. So everyone's complaining about everything regard to PvP. There's no proper loot to chase after. All of that is what people are complaining about, and Bungie's just addressing a few things, is more of how I see it.
Right. I feel for you. I do. But I don't feel for you guys enough anymore. I've seen too many of my toys get taken away. I don't feel for you enough where I care about them making those little changes anymore.
Well, what I'm saying...
I want the conversation to move beyond... Icarus Dash is too powerful in PvP.
Right.
Icarus Dash is too powerful in PvP, but the way to fix that is to separate the sandbox and have Icarus Dash work over here in PvP and like this in PvE.
I think blaming that on the PvP community that they're saying that is not entirely accurate, because if you were to say separate the sandboxes, every member of the PvP community will probably agree with that. The main difference is we're saying, yeah, let's do that, and Bungie's saying, no, we'll just fix that one problem, and maybe then it'll be perfect. It's a Bungie fault, not PvP. PvP.
Yes, I agree. It's a Bungie problem that they need to address. In order to avoid going ridiculously over time, let's go ahead and move on to our next topics.
Okay.
Because we could probably continue having the same conversation for the next hour. So Coda and I had a brief intermission, and we have decided that we are going to take the next topic and make an entirely separate video about it. Sunsetting. I have a very hot take on sunsetting that most people disagree with. and I feel like I could argue my points for a good long while. We're at about the hour point now, so at this point, I think we'll just call it here. Look out for Tower Talk 3.5 regarding our reactions to the VOG Master difficulty. We will see how we feel about it now that it's out, because we haven't had a chance to talk about it. So until next time, I'm Shank, that's Coda, and we will see you guys next week.